Good evening, everybody worldwide. KevinJJohnston here. Welcome to the Tax and Money Show. This is episode number 50, and I decided to call an old colleague up here. Well, younger than me colleague, but someone I haven't seen in a while. Someone that you saw me do a great number of shows with, and that is Chris Sky. He's going to be joining us in a couple of minutes here to talk about international commerce and why it is so important that each and every one of us out there begin to expand our horizons. We have got to be looking to the international market to make money these days. And all of you know, I got to repeat my story very quickly. You all know that I escaped communist Canada. Yeah, where I was making nothing every single month. I was not even making enough money to pay rent. I was an indentured slave, cutting grass and digging holes in the snow so that I could afford rent. I leave, I go to Panama, where I am right now, and I get wealthy in less than 9 months because the rest of the world wants to have people with dreams, drive, and ambition. When you're in Canada and you've got all the above, dreams, drive, and ambition, what happens? Well, you get shunned by society and they just put you in prison because they don't want anybody shining like the star that we have joining us right now, Chris Sky. My Lord, brother, it is so good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
I'm very happy to be here. For everyone watching, I just finished up the gym in Mexico, just like Kevin. I can't say I fully escaped communist Canada, but I spend a lot less time there. I only go back when I have to, and that should tell you a lot because I was born and raised in Canada. I loved Canada. I truly believe that in its heyday, which was the 90s, Canada was a top 10 country in the world. There were amazing opportunities in Canada back then. I can give you a perfect example of how far Canada has fallen with one analogy, and it's an analogy in my field of business because I'm a residential develop, design, and builder. So when I was about 18 years old, we were doing a townhouse site at Weston and Rutherford, Vaughan, Ontario. Everybody knows that area. Very popular area. Me as an 18, 19-year-old kid, still living at home, but working a job, making around $3,000 a month. So without expenses, since you're living at home, you could rake in 30 plus grand a year. Well, how much are we selling these townhouses for? A 2,500 square foot townhouse was around $330,000. So an 18-year-old kid with a normal day job, just working 5 to 6 days a week, if he's living at home and he doesn't have to pay rent or have all these other expenses, within 1 year, they could save up a deposit and purchase this house. And then the mortgage payment a month would be around $1,200 to $1,500 a month after their down payment. So an 18-year-old with not even a good job in 1 year could save enough to purchase a house and have the monthly income to carry that house. Fast forward to today. 18-year-olds today can look at the exact same style and size of townhouse. Only they're making $4 or $5,000 a month, 40 to 50 grand a year. That same house now costs around 1.3 to 1.4 million. So they need at least 150 grand just for the down payment. And then they have a mortgage that's going to be like 5, 6 grand a month. So it's physically impossible for the vast majority of people to own a home now in Canada. And if you look at the stats, places like Quebec are leading the way with over 70% of the people now renting. Now, I don't know if everyone remembers the World Economic Forum video where they said you're going to own nothing and be happy, but that's where Canada's headed. It's headed down the path where your economic prosperity is dwindling every single day. There's less and less opportunities to make money, and there's more and more restrictions coming out. Small business got destroyed during COVID, never recovered. Our housing market got destroyed, never recovered. We are finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel for people that are living in Canada now that aren't going to be able to get out, don't have many other options. Thanks to the multiple interest rate drops that we saw from June, July, September, November, December, and they're going to do it again in May. We had our interest rates peak at 5.5%, and now they're at 3%. And by the summer, they might even be at 2.5%. That's going to spur a lot of economic activity in Canada. There's going to be a lot of new housing development and condo developments. A lot of people are going to be able to start selling their homes again because the housing market prices are going to rise as people can afford a lot more mortgages with the lower interest rate. The rise in construction costs is going to steady off. So I think we're going to see at least a year or two of prosperity in Canada. I was worried for a moment when they started the tariff war back and forth for a second, but that thankfully isn't going to happen. And we can explain the tariff war in about 2 seconds. So people that think it's a good idea to do a tariff war dollar for dollar against the United States, let me explain something to you very quickly. The United States imports around 350 billion US from Canada a year. The United States economy is $30 trillion. That means Canada is responsible for around 1% of the US economy. So even if Canada banned all trade with the United States would have to make up 1% of their GDP. That's absolutely nothing. They wouldn't even feel it. They could just trade more with any of their other trading partners. Meanwhile, Canada imports almost 500 billion from the United States, and our economy is only $2 trillion. So that means the United States is 25% of Canada's economy. Now, a 2 to 3% drop in GDP sustained will be considered a recession. So imagine a 25% drop in GDP overnight if the States just stopped trading with Canada. Justin Trudeau's assertion that we would find other trading partners and we would plug the coal. No, we would get absolutely crippled. So that's why Canada capitulated. That's why Colombia capitulated. That's why Mexico will capitulate. And that's why Trump was very brazen and bold. And he made a very smart political move and he made himself look big and powerful. However, people that live in the United States, you got to be aware of a couple things. Number one, your dollar has a ridiculous amount of debt. $30 trillion in debt. Okay? Number two, your dollar only survived this long because it was the world reserve currency. Why was it with the world reserve currency? It was called the petrodollar for a reason. Up until almost 2015, virtually 100% of oil transactions around the world were in US dollars. And this led to a lot of other commodities being traded internationally in US dollars. Then BRICS came around. BRICS is moving away from the dollar because of all the debt and because they don't want the U.S. to have superpower status that the dollar gives them, which is unlimited money printing ability. So what happened in 2023? According to JP Morgan, almost 20% of all oil sales were in non-U.S. dollars in just a few short years. 20% of the oil market, which is the largest traded commodity in the world, is no longer done in US dollars. So that should be a wake-up call to Americans that your dollar is losing the status of world reserve currency, and it's going to continue, and there's nothing that Trump can do to stop it. What did Trump say he's going to do? He said he's going to go tariff war with the BRICS. Are you out of your mind? It's one thing to do a tariff war with Canada, Mexico, and Colombia, where we have a combined GDP of maybe $5 trillion. But the United States wants to mess with China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, Iran, UAE, and many others. You add up the GDPs of the BRICS nations, it's actually higher or very close to the GDP of the United States, but they also have a very large percentage of the world population. So you don't want to be messing the tariff war with them, because not only will they actually match your tariffs dollar for dollar and hurt the U.S. economy and hurt the U.S. purchasing power, but they will continue and accelerate their de-dollarization. Countries like Russia, who are seen as big enemies of the United States, still do over 50% of all their international exports sold in U.S. dollars. So imagine they get the BRICS nations pissed off for real, and they determine that they're no longer going to use U.S. dollars for any trading. The U.S. would be crippled. For people that do have wealth in the U.S., my father passed away recently, so I'm dealing with the estate, and I'm learning a lot about transfer of wealth through generations. And you got to be warned if you live in the United States. Most states have what they call an estate tax. Have you heard about this, Kevin?
Yes, I have. I just had a conversation 2 days ago. There's a former member of the IRS is visiting Panama City here. It was a by chance meeting. So I bought dinner because I had to hear the story. And my Lord, the things that I was told about what America's doing in taxes right now, it's actually quite frightening. But please, you go ahead.
Well, yes. So if you have any type of wealth whatsoever, even if you just own a small home and it's paid for, in most states, they now have what they call an inheritance tax. And if you just die, and even if you have a will and leave everything, or you have no will and it gets split up equally between your relatives and beneficiaries, they can tax up to 50% of your estate. So if you're somebody that worked all your life, saved every dollar, and you think you're going to put that away and give it to your family one day, they will take half of that money in many states. So ways to get around that, everybody take note of this. You can create trusts in your own state, and each state has slightly different rules on how to do this, but you could talk to a professional in your specific state, and you can put houses in trust, you can put vehicles in trust, other types of properties in trust, precious metals in trust, anything, stocks, all this stuff in trust, and the trust owns it, not you. So when you die, the trust will become whoever you put on paper will have it, and then they don't tax your inheritance. So this is how all the rich people get away without paying this ridiculous and cumbersome tax, where the normal people who don't know and they're not prepared for this, they just, one of their relatives dies and boom, they just lost all that. So that's something to be aware of in the United States.
Yeah. And this is something I have been doing with Canadian and American clients is, let's say they got a house here. We'll open up a numbered corporation here and put the house inside of it. Now, we write the bylaws of the corporation to state that mom and dad own, let's say, 52% jointly. If mom and dad die, then the shares get split amongst the kids. But that numbered corporation that holds the house is inside of an umbrella corporation inside of a trust. So we actually have 3 to 4 layers of protection when we set these trusts up now for Americans and Canadians. And it's working like a charm. So if you have any debt, Chris, I don't know if you know this one, but if you have any debts whatsoever, the Canada Revenue Agency is a little different than the IRS, actually a lot, because they don't have any teeth and they have no power. But they'll send you a letter, make 3 phone calls, 1 more threat letter, and then they'll ask the bank for your money, and the banks will give it to them, which is actually illegal, but they do it. The way that we fix this is I go back and I do their taxes for them, and then open up corporations for them in multiple provinces and move all their money into corporations that are numbered, and then put those into a trust. So what I'm hoping, Chris, is that you and I can finally just get through to everybody saying you can't have anything in the United States or in Canada in your own name. Not cars, not gold, not silver, not vacation properties, not houses, not condos, not planes, not helicopters, not businesses, nothing. Chris, take it away.
Especially now, especially in Canada, now they have your exit tax, because and it starts with what, $25,000, but give it a few years and that so-called exit tax will become like the inheritance tax, and it's going to become a percentage of your net worth of everything that's in your name. So if you want to try to escape Canada 10 years from now, don't be surprised if they have a 25% exit tax and they're going to try to take a whole bunch of your money before you leave, because that's exactly what this government is trying to do. They're desperate. You know what the last vestige of wealth in Canada is? Private wealth. It's the private home ownership. That's it. They already killed the small businesses. They already took everybody's spending wealth and purchasing power with destroying the Canadian dollar. So now the last vestige of wealth in private hands in Canada is located in the private homes. So what are they doing? They're making homes more and more unaffordable, but they're also doing something else. What are the most common homeowners in Canada? They're old people. They're called baby boomers. They're getting older. So they are getting older, and they're being shamed for living in these big houses. Trudeau wants to move them into condos. But if you want to stay in your house, guess what's going to happen? Because of the insane rising cost of living in Canada and the insane inflation and how bad our social security, our pension systems and everything are, whatever you're getting as a retirement is not going to make ends meet. So you know what the next largest wonderful industry is going to be in Canada and the United States? Reverse mortgages. No. Where now, to make ends meet, your parents that have owned this home for 30 years mortgage free are now going to be building up debt again on their house. And every month, they're going to take out thousands of dollars more to keep up their lifestyle that they want for their golden years. Then when they die and there's a $300,000-$400,000 debt left on the house, and their kids who don't have two nickels to rub together can't afford the mortgage, guess what happens? The house gets repossessed. And then they sell it for pennies on the dollar to companies like BlackRock. And they do this to entire neighborhoods so they can tear down the houses and build these buildings and get you in rentals. And in Canada, go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to say that you're right about the reverse mortgage and how dangerous this is. I actually did my research pretending to be a 70-year-old man. Now, I know I don't sound like one, but I put some grumbling in my throat and whatnot. And this is the way that it works. There's a company out there called CHIP, C-H-I-P, reverse mortgage. So you got to be over 55. Your house has to be paid off. They'll give you a $300K against your house. Instantly, they start charging interest between 6 and 9%, depending on if they like you or not. Now, here's the kicker, dude. You are not allowed to pay anything, no principal and no interest payments for the first year. You're allowed to pay 50% of the interest payments in the second year, full interest payments in the third year, principal in the fourth year. It's designed to actually get you out of your house in the sixth year. Because if you read the fine print, it's around, once you get down to only 20% equity remaining, they will sell the property on you. So they are getting old folks out of their homes within 6 years. So I've actually been talking to
You're left out the most important part. Those contracts are designed that way because they're expecting you to die within 5 years. And if you don't die within 5 years and the debt load gets passed on to your kids that they know aren't going to be able to afford it, like you said, they have the other clause that'll probably get you kicked out by the 6th year if you haven't died yet. That's how predatory these reverse mortgages are. And I'm telling you, remember I said this, they're going to become within the next 10 to 15 years as common as people are using mortgages now to buy houses. Because back in the day, nobody needed a mortgage to buy a house. When our parents or my parents were in the 60s, the average man made $10,000 a year and the average house cost $30,000. So that means with 3 years salary, you could buy a house debt and interest free. So people didn't need mortgages. Nowadays, the average person in Canada makes, or Toronto makes 50 grand a year, and the average house is over $1 million. So it's over 20 years of your salary. And then because you need a mortgage, now it's going to be 40 years for you to pay off that home when before it took 3. And you have your baby boomer parents trying to tell you how great you have it, how you've never had it better, and how you should be so appreciative of how great your country is. It's actually far worse for children today than it was for children in the 1960s. It's not even close. They literally had 10 times the amount of purchasing power. And that's why people need to combine. And if COVID didn't teach you this, and the shattering Canadian economy didn't teach you this, well, I don't know, maybe we got to teach you this. It's called international nomadism. Look how much better your life got when you left Canada. Oh, yeah. Look how much better my life got when I left Canada. And everybody that leaves Canada and expands their horizons, even if they don't leave permanently, even if you create footprints and create roots in other countries, that's how you gain freedom. That's how you gain prosperity. Why did I want to come to Mexico? Here's a perfect example. The Mexican banking system. What do we have in Canada? We have CDIC insurance, which insures like $100K in the big banks. We have horrible savings and other accounts that give you virtually no interest that are eaten up by the fees anyway. In Mexico, they have banks that will insure up to $225,000 Canadian, give or take a few $1,000s, fluctuates with the peso. But you can get up to 15% return annually on your money in a normal savings account. That is not me misspeaking. I will say it again, up to 15% return on your money in the Mexican big bank. So you can go to BBVA, Santander, Banco Norte, any of the big banks, some of them are international, and you can get better insurance than you can get in Canada, and you can get exponentially higher interest rate just sitting your money there. And the money here goes a lot further. Why are people moving to Mexico? Why are people moving to Panama? It's very simple. How far does $6 grand a month go in Toronto? You're lucky if you're paying rent and can purchase groceries. How far does $6 grand a month go in Panama or in Mexico? You're living like an
Everywhere.
absolute king. That's that simple. So people say that they have problems leaving Canada. If your life in Canada is so shit that you have a low-end job that's basically paying you minimum wage and you can barely make ends meet, you can barely pay rent, that's a no-brainer. Why the hell would you stay there? You can get the same type of job in other places and make a lot more money. But what do we advocate for people to do? How do we get people to move here and be prosperous right away? There's 3 ways. It's simple. A lot of people own houses in Canada. Their house is worth like $1 million. In Canada, that's nothing. You sell that house in Canada for $1 million and bring that money to Mexico, you could be making $10,000 a month passive income, doing nothing, sitting on your ass all day by the beach and making $10K a month off your money, all insured, versus being in Canada and just suffering. So anybody that has home equity or money, you can invest it in other countries, diversify your assets away from just Canadian dollars, away from just US dollars, US dollar, euro, Mexican dollar, gold, silver, crypto, real estate. You want to be in as diverse as possible. You want to be in as many money markets as possible, and you want to have a footprint all over the world. So if shit hits the fan again, you have options. You're not stuck in Canada. The other way you can easily move to any of these countries is if you have a remote job. Remote and online work is so abundant now in Canada, especially after COVID. And even a part-time remote job can make you like $3,000 a month. In Mexico, that will make you have a great life. I can give you an example of a family in Mexico. My friend's maid. Okay, listen to this. In Mexico City, which is the most expensive part of Mexico, the average salary is around $1,500 US a month. If you go to outskirts and stuff, it's a little lower. So these people live in Playa del Carmen, where the average salary is around $1,000 to $1,200. This maid has a family of 6 with 4 children, 2 children working age, 2 children do not work. So 4 incomes in the family. The maid makes $650 US a month. Her husband makes $750, so they make less than the average. Their 2 kids together combined for almost $1,000 a month. So altogether, they have around $2,500 US income a month for a family of 6. Within 5 years, Kevin, they were able to buy a $70,000 US home, mortgage-free, interest-free, bought outright, and now they own a home and have that same monthly income, and they have $0 of debt, which makes them wealthier than 95% of Canadians. And that's one of the poorest examples I can give you. So imagine if you and your girlfriend are living in Toronto or Vancouver in a stupid condo, and you're each working remote online jobs and making $3-4 a month each. You can take that combined income and work in Mexico. You don't have to stay there. And in Mexico, you can get a house with a pool and 4 bedrooms for like $500 a month rent. And then you have all that leftover money to enjoy your life, go on vacations, do the things people used to do before we lost our purchasing power and before we lost our ability to live well in a so-called first world country like Canada. So these are the things that we try to make people understand. Number 1, you have to understand that where you are is not necessarily the best for you. Number 2, stop asking us, where is the best place to go? Everybody has different wants and needs. You need to do your research and ask the question, where is the best place to go for me? Everyone's different. There's billions of people in the world. Some people have families. Some people like sunshine. Some people don't. Some people like water. There's so many variables that go into what's the best place for me. So the best idea is to do research, find out what you like about one place, go visit there, and then slowly start expanding your horizons. I'm also Italian. Both my parents come from Italy. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to try to get my EU passport. Why? Because now I can work and live and travel legally to another 20+ countries. Now I have access to the Switzerland and Liechtenstein banking systems, 2 of the best in the world. So these are the kind of moves people need to make when they're thinking about their future and they're thinking about how they want to support themselves and support their family. Canada is not the be-all, end-all, ladies and gentlemen. Canada was a top 10 country in the 90s. Now, you're lucky if it's in the top 50. Give it another 5 to 10 years, it's going to be worse. For all you people that think Canada is going to get better, it's not. It's going to have a good couple of years right now because of the low interest rates, because of all the excitement about the Conservatives winning the election. When the Conservatives do win the election, they're going to eliminate the GST on new home sales to bring up the economy even more and look like heroes. Right. So there's going to be some good times coming in Canada in the next couple of years. But that doesn't mean it's going to be better than it was. It doesn't mean it's going to improve in general. It's still going to get more expensive every year. You're still going to have less freedom every year. And you're still going to be more and more isolated from the rest of the world every year. Every year you take before you make action like Kevin did, before you take action like we did, it gets harder and harder and harder to leave. Even countries like Mexico are now requiring visas for most countries to come and visit them. They are raising the requirements very much for people to be able to become residents. They're closing the windows of opportunity all around the world. So people need to take notice of this, and people need to take advantage of this. It's a no-brainer. Hey, Kevin, how much happier are you that you left Canada? Like, why are people so obsessed with Canada? The worst weather in the world, the worst government in the world, the lowest quality food in the world. You have to drive everywhere, nonstop, every day, which is an unhealthy lifestyle. And you have no freedom. You can't even say something on the internet without either getting the cops called on you, getting banned from social media, being arrested.
Chris, you and I went through all that nonsense when we were fighting that nonsense pandemic thing. But what I wanted to say to you is you are correct. I actually had the police coming to my house between 1 and 5 times a week to remind me the things that I was saying on Twitter wasn't nice and that the mayor didn't appreciate it. Who cares what the mayor thinks? All right. But you were talking about Canada being a top 10 country. Yes. In the 70s and 80s, it was remarkable. It crashed a little bit in 94, but nonetheless, it was still really damn good. It's not even in the top 50 anymore for economy, for education, and for healthcare. Canada healthcare is atrocious. Here in Panama, I just had a friend of mine get a $6 x-ray on a broken hand. $6. They wrapped the guy's hand up for an additional $12, and he's fine. Everything's good. The hospitals here in Panama City are top notch. They're unreal. They got a brand new one here where they built it into a shopping mall. So instead of having a hospital with a couple of small restaurants inside, they decided to put the hospital inside the mall. So when you're trying to recover or you're bored, you go into the mall and just explore, have yourself a good time. These are things that they're simply not doing in Canada. And Panama City's subway system is better than Toronto. It's only 35 cents a ride. And they just added 30 kilometers of it west of the city. So the rest of the world, Chris, and you know this, you travel the world. The rest of the world is competing with Canada and the United States, and they're winning. So how happy am I since I left? I'm ecstatic. I haven't had a single bad day in a year and a half since I left the country.
And that's every single person I know that left Canada, whether they went to Mexico, they went to Costa Rica, they went to Colombia, they went to Panama, they went to Cambodia, they went to Thailand, went to Europe. No matter where they went, they are happier than they are in Canada. Just walking around the streets of Playa del Carmen, you have a totally different energy. Besides the fact that I could actually walk around in a tank top, get a tan, be comfortable and happy and healthy, you see people smiling and enjoying themselves and being friendly. You don't get that in Canada. Everybody's miserable. Everybody's walking around with a scowl on their face. Everybody's interested in everybody else's business. And all they care about is being able to pay their rent and go and eat some friggin' beer and wings and watch a hockey game. And then you have these Canadians that say, oh, we're fighting for Canada. No, you're sitting there doing nothing and simply tolerating your life getting worse and worse and worse and making excuses. Canadians are only #1 in the world for one thing: making excuses. That's what I've come to realize.
You are right. I've actually said many times that Canada's #1 export is cowardice. There we are. Chris, we're also broadcasting simultaneously here on TikTok and Kick, so they can't see you. Could you just remind everybody out there who you are and why they gotta love you? Go ahead.
No problem. I'm Chris Sky, Chris Sakocha, really. And I'm in low-rise residential development, geopolitical analyst, a best-selling author, award-winning activist, and I've spoken all over the world in more than a dozen countries live. And if we're talking online, dozens of countries. I've done hundreds of shows, hundreds of interviews, and I'm sure I've influenced the lives of millions of people. Even today, Kevin, even just walking around in Playa today, and I take streets that aren't crowded because I know my ways around here, so I take all the side streets there. I got stopped 6 times today by people who want to take photos and people that just wanted to talk to me. And that's in Mexico. It happens when I'm in Colombia. It happens all around the world. So I know I've had an impact. That's why they had to ban me on social media. Not a fake ban like Andrew Tate, who says he's banned. I'm actually banned on every single social media, including Elon Musk's. But I will spill the beans on one thing, though. I am going back to Canada soon for a couple of days for a special event where I'm going to be speaking in Canada, but I can't talk more about it. That's all I can say. But
I would just be the first one to say, don't go. That place it's dead. It's actually quite dead to me. And for the record, everybody, yes, I've known Chris Sky now. You and I met in 2017, and I was actually quite pleased about the whole thing. You were apprehensive about me because you weren't sure that I was legitimately fighting for the cause, and then you realized that I was, and I realized you were, and geez, man, like here we are. And Chris, you know what was all
you can't, especially in the movement. Everybody has ulterior motives, but no, you're a good guy. You were legit. You were honest, and you got a bad rap because they didn't like you, just like they didn't like me. So screw them.
Yeah, well, for our American friends and our Australian friends who are watching tonight, what Chris Sky is referring to here is I ran for mayor of Calgary. We had huge parties like this, all over the city. Chris, you showed up for a couple of these events, and you showed up for quite a few of the podcasts that we had done. And both you and I just were absolutely raked over the coals by the media and arrested over and over and over again because, well, we told the truth about how the country functions, and you can't tell the truth in Canada. But neither here nor there. What I do want to do, Chris, is I want to tell the truth about how much better life can be when you just take a chance. Now, I have a lot of clients coming down to see me here in Panama, but the excuses go as follows. Maybe you've heard some of these. I'm trying to talk folks into just leave. Come down to Panama or Mexico to go see you, Chris, for 5 days. The dog. Who's going to watch my dog? Who's going to watch my cat? Who's going to feed my fish? My kids, like, what about my kids? My mom and dad, they're kind of sick. And so everyone blames family, and these family members are not saying don't go.
Yeah.
It's the sheer fear of, I guess, the unknown. But what is there that is so awful that you think you're going to see in Mexico, Panama, or otherwise? I think the only two countries
Canadians have been programmed by the media to think that Canada and the U.S. are the best countries in the world, and every other country is a third world country where you're going to get kidnapped, you're going to get killed, or you're going to get stabbed, or you're going to get robbed. They even put out advisory warnings about going to Mexico. It's like, give me a break. I'm definitely safer walking in Playa del Carmen than I am in downtown Toronto, where people get carjacked every friggin' day. People have home invasions every friggin' day. They have to put bars on the jewelry stores inside. You see that? You see the jewelry stores in the GTA? They now have bars right in front of the display cases because how many robberies just keep happening virtually every day in Canada? So, no, the propaganda Canadians hear, it just feeds their excuses. And it's like you said, most people use different family members as excuse. The only excuse I ever heard that was actually plausible was a gentleman who was divorced and the wife didn't want to let the kids leave with him. And that's what was keeping him in Canada. In that case, I can almost understand it. But for the vast majority of you, especially people that are single or people that are just living with their significant other, what the hell are you still doing in Canada? Like, there's a reason that a record number of people have left Canada, ladies and gentlemen. And it's not the stupid and the weak that are leaving. It's the smart and the strong and the people with money, because they do their research and they understand that they can have a better life elsewhere. I'm going to Colombia next month. It's even cheaper than here in Mexico. And I go there because I do crypto. I do some crypto work with a gentleman that's based in there. And crypto is another great thing. But it can be very dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. I can show you how in 8 weeks we've made people 700% on their investment. And then I can show you how just last week I know someone that within an hour lost 40 Bitcoin. 40 Bitcoin.
Ooh.
1 hour. So there's definitely money. There's definitely money to be made in the crypto market, especially right now because we're in the middle of a bull run. And for people that actually dabble in crypto, I'm going to give a little advice for the next 3 to 4 weeks. I see altcoins like Cardano, Chainlink, what else? And even XRP, I believe in the next 3 to 4 weeks are going to have a really good run. So if people like to trade crypto or people like to put a little bit money into crypto and watch and see what happens, my money's on the altcoins in the next 3 weeks to a month. And I think people will see a 2 or even 3x on certain altcoins. Just giving a little heads up, because I dabble in the crypto realm, and I deal with a lot of international people in that, and so I get some good inside info. And it's just another avenue where people should invest. But like anything else, if you put all your eggs in one basket, you can get hurt real bad. But is crypto worth it? Hell yes. I'll be completely honest.
It has been. I mean, Solana, XRP, and Bitcoin, I've done incredibly well with those currencies. And, you know, Chris, the sad part is I didn't even have $5 to rub together while living in Canada to be able to buy that stuff. And this is not me bragging, just for the record, everyone. I'm not bragging. Chris, after all the nonsense that went on in Canada with you and I doing journalism and whatnot, and with all of the journalists getting locked up for journaling, for just speaking the truth, there were 152 court orders against me that I had to endure. So I got to the point where I was making $900 a month, literally on welfare, and my rent was $900 a month. So in order to eat, I had to go to the food banks, and I had to cut grass and trade my time in shoveling snow and whatnot to have food in the fridge. Ridiculous. I leave Canada, and as it stands right now, I'm making about $90,000 a month, because Panama and the rest of the world allow you, if you've got drive and ambition, to explode and do what you do best. You know, a friend of mine, he is a black dude named Kelly. I love the guy. I've known him for 35 years. He says to me and all Canadians, he says, you know, if you speak English and you've got that lovely white skin, why aren't you millionaires? Go around the world, use your white skin. Now, I get what he's saying, but and then he modified it later to say, yeah, you just have to be able to speak English clearly and look good in a suit, and you'll get whatever you want, because the rest of the world believes that if you speak English fluently and wear a suit, that you know more than them, right? So they just start to throw money at you. Now, I'm not saying go around the world and take advantage of people, Chris, but I am saying that the opportunities are there. You know, right now in Panama, I've met the mayors of the 5 biggest cities in the country. Try doing that in Canada. Whenever you try to talk to any politician, what do? They run and they put 2 security guards in front of you. Yep. Here, they buy you dinner and they talk with you. And I blew the mayor of Panama City away when I was showing him the charts of the Canadian banking system. I said, here, this is Toronto Dominion Bank. They've been around for 130 years. And right now, if you have $1 in the bank or $1 million in the bank, the interest rate is 0.01%. And they all of them, their jaws drop, because like you said, there's 15% interest in Mexico. There's between 3 and 12 here in Panama. So people, your money is going nowhere in Canada. Chris, talk more about banking. Let's hear this.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned TD Bank, because everybody knows that TD Bank is on the hook, and they already paid over $5 billion in fines for the largest money laundering scheme in the history of the world. And I want people to look this up, because when I say this, they're not going to believe it. But in 9 years, they just uncovered in the last 9 years, TD Bank has lost over $11 trillion that they can't account for that appears to be laundered. That's more than our economy in the last 9 years. Our entire GDP equivalent was laundered through TD Bank, which is why Canada has received the award for most corrupt banking system in the world, because everybody comes here to launder their money. Yet if you're a Canadian citizen, they do everything they can to stifle you. They do everything they can to penalize you. 75% cap or 70% capital gains tax, ladies and gentlemen. Do you know how ridiculous that is? That means if you made $250,000, the government is taking $175,000 and leaving you with $75,000. And say, are you like? I know you're Canadian. I know you want to be nice. I know you're very tolerant. But even the stupidest person on planet Earth has to understand that that is a recipe for disaster. And it's only going to get worse. This is what people don't understand. And you do not want to be stuck here. You do not want to be stuck here during the next COVID crisis. You do not want to be stuck there during the next financial crisis. You do not want to be stuck there when they try the next World Economic Forum experiment. You don't want to be stuck there, period.
You're right. Now, I want to point something out. When you compare the Canadian and the American banking system, the Americans do it right. Their banking system is capital-based. So if you've got a good idea and a good business plan, you'll get money. And you can go out there and give it your best shot. But in Canada, it's asset-based banking. So what happens whenever you go to borrow money in a Canadian bank? First off, it's some foreigner. They don't speak English. And the first thing that they'll say is, oh, what's your address? What's your house? Oh, they want to know about your house. That's all they want to talk about is your house, because you're not going to get any money, which is making the private lenders now quite rich. But I got one more thing to share with you here, and that is Canadian banks are not respected anywhere else in the world. You can't transfer money here to Panama from a Canadian bank, period. You've got to convert it to US dollars through a private company. Then you've got to send it to your American bank account, then send it to Panama from your American account. And Panamanian banks can't send money back to Canada. So I don't understand how Canadian banks can have trillions of dollars when they're not doing any loaning of any kind. And so let's talk a little bit here about money laundering from your perspective. Go ahead.
Well, the biggest money laundering that they found they're doing is they're money laundering for the drug cartels. Those are the only type of people that have that kind of money. Pablo Escobar at one point was making billions of dollars a day. So what do they do with that money? They give it to institutions like TD Bank, and TD Bank will wash it for a fee of like 30%. And that's why you end up with a bank with trillions of dollars. We're talking about the proceeds of drug trafficking, the proceeds of child trafficking, and the proceeds of every other black market industry you can imagine. And it's like I said, if you look online, they'll say the black market economy is the equivalent of the real economy. And the numbers there, literally, they laundered the equivalent of the GDP of Canada the last 9 years, give or take a little bit. So it goes to show you that their numbers are accurate. The black economy is just as big as the normal economy. And the banks make money off the illegal shit, just like they make money off all the normal people. And that's why they are the most evil institutions. That's why, you ever heard the quote, if the Americans allow the banks to control the issue of currency, they will grow up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered? Well, we're living that right now. We're living that right now. We already showed you how your parents could buy a house with 3 years of salary. Well, you need 20 years of salary and then another 40 years to pay it off. So literally, you buying a house now in Canada is 60 years of your life. 20 years of salary plus 40 years of mortgage. And then what? As soon as you pay the mortgage off, you're going to have to go to the reverse mortgage within a year or two because you're going to need that money because you got nothing left. Canada is a joke. It's not a first world country anymore. And it's not a place where your children are going to be prosperous. If you're in a country and the economic situation is showing you that your children are going to have less opportunity to be successful and wealthy than you were, then it's your responsibility as a parent or as the leader of the household to change your situation. And if that means leaving the country, then it means leaving the country. How many people in Canada were born there versus how many people in Canada came from other countries? Canada is a nation of immigrants. We all came from somewhere. My parents came from Italy. Why? Because it was right after World War II. So it was not a very good time to be there. Just like it's now not a very good time to be in Canada. But the average person is so brainwashed and so uneducated and so weak-minded that they would rather stay where they know and have a worse life every year than even, it's not even really taking a chance if you just go and visit other places. It's just expanding your horizon, but most people won't even do that. How many Americans don't even have a passport? Answer: more than half of them, because they think the U.S. is the best and only country in the world. Well, the U.S. is going to have to realize that the power structure is changing. They're going to have to start playing nicely with other international countries, especially China, Russia, and the BRICS nations. Otherwise, there's going to be turmoil for the West. The West is not a place people want to live in the next 5 years. Look at the situation with Russia and Ukraine. How many NATO countries have already reintroduced conscription, forced military service? Why? Because of the war with Russia. They're anticipating that it's going to expand and they're going to have to directly war with Russia. So we have already 30% of NATO countries have already reintroduced or are reintroducing conscription. Countries like Denmark, little I'm so happy, I'm so polite Denmark, have introduced mandatory military service now for females. Females. So that's why I like places like Mexico. I like places like Panama. They're non-NATO countries, yet they're trading partners with NATO. They're trading partners with Russia and China. They don't get involved in wars in Israel and Ukraine. So these are safe places where you can not have to worry about this kind of thing. And you can live and eat healthier food, and you can live a healthier lifestyle. I walk 15 to 25,000 steps a day now here because I can. You can't do that in Canada. You can't do that in most parts of the United States. You simply can't. And people don't understand how much different that is. My sister came down here. She got a residency in Mexico. She had never left Canada for more than 2 weeks in her entire life. And she is loving Mexico more than I can tell you. And we're just chilling. And I'm telling you, people, if you try it out, you're going to understand. Every single person I know that has left Canada is happier than they were in Canada, is doing better financially than they were in Canada, and has a much brighter future than they did in Canada. If you're in the top 1% of wealth in Canada, great. If you love the policies, great. But if you're like 99% of the people, if you actually apply yourself and you actually do your research like Kevin did, like I did, and many others did, you can find that you will be happier and more successful and have a better future in many other countries around the world than Canada. I know this is hard for people to hear, but it's the reality of the situation. And I don't hate Canada.
I want to make it simple for everybody. The left-wing politics of Canada destroyed it. And it's extremely stressful to be around hardcore left-wing politics. Why? Because the people who are in it are not even happy when they're in it and espousing left-wing rhetoric to the rest of the world. So on the conservative side, on the right-wing side, if you will, or even the centrist side, you're constantly being bombarded by this left-wing nonsense. It's tough to be around. On top of that, dead economy, no jobs of any particular type, no buying power for your money. And the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation owns half the radio stations in the entire country. And that is also left-wing rhetoric all day. So, Chris, let me tell you what happened. My blood pressure when I was still in Canada, so let's go back to the age of 51 for me. My blood pressure was 200/100, and it stayed there. It was high 4 straight months. When I was eating food, there was times where every second or third meal, I didn't bother eating anymore because it tasted like licking a 9-volt battery. It was this alkali taste and smell with the blood pressure being so high. My doctor told me, you find a way to deal with this or you're going to have a stroke. So I left Canada and I got my blood pressure checked 5 weeks later, 120/80. I have it checked once a month here in Panama, 120/80. I had my blood tested now 4 separate times. Everything is level, including blood sugar, except for two things that are a little bit off balance for a guy my age: testosterone and creatine. Well, that's good. It's very good for a guy now who's 53. What I'm saying here, I'm not bragging. I'm telling you that I needed to get the hell out of there. I needed to be away from an economy where I could not make money, to come to one where I could make money. You and I, we're okay working 12, 15, 16 hours a day. But in Canada, you don't get paid for it. In Panama and Mexico, you do. Yeah.
No, I have no problem with hard work and putting in the time, but not when the government's going to take 3/4 of my money. Like, sorry, that's absolutely ridiculous. Everybody that's in my position is closing down their companies, even companies that have been lasting for decades, and they're going to move their assets out of the country. Why would they stay there? You got to be retarded. I'm sorry. You got to have something wrong with you to want to stay there. And the only people I know that want to stay there are, like you said, left-wing psychos that love the idea of puberty blockers for 6-year-olds and love the idea of LGBT flags everywhere and tranny cops. Did you see the transgender cop car in Toronto?
I did.
Yeah. That's absolutely ridiculous. At least in the United States, they got rid of the transgenders from prisons and transgenders from sports, but not so in Canada. In Canada, we're supposed to pretend that a 200-pound guy in a female bathing suit is now a woman, even though his balls are hanging out the side. And when he beats them all by 300 meters in a 500-meter race, we're supposed to just cheer and pretend that he's an amazing athlete. It's ridiculous. Right. Canada is literally 100% built on lies and built on stupidity, and it's designed to turn adults into beta males and childlike mindsets so they can be walked all over, controlled, and you won't do anything but comply. You know how many people I talk to in Canada that claim that they never complied with COVID, they never wore the mask? You can ask 10 Canadians today, 9 out of 10 will swear that they never wore the mask. Oh, really? Then who are the 99% of people wearing them? Everybody but you? Give me a break. Canadians lie. Canadians make excuses, and Canadians live in a friggin' fantasy land that they create for themselves, because if they have to face reality and realize how shit their country is and how it's all their fault and how they're still not doing anything to make their life better, most of them can't handle it. So they'd rather just lie to themselves. And that's Canada. That's Canada on a plate.
I gotta maybe also, I'm laughing about this all the time. You know, the Calgary police, when I was running for mayor of Calgary, because they knew I wasn't going to be wearing a mask, followed me for 2 days in a helicopter, snapping telescopic photographs of me. I've got the disclosure package. It's like this. They even had to write down in the disclosure package the fact that it cost the Calgary taxpayer $275,000 of fuel and maintenance and pilot fees to follow little old me around the city. And when you explain this to Canadians, even when you show them the disclosure from the police, they don't believe it. So Fantasyland is not going to help you, people. You need to comprehend that the rest of the world has looked at the United States and Canada with envy for the last 50 to 60 years. Everybody wanted to come to North America. Now, nobody wants to go to North America except to go on a welfare, because they've been lied to about how good the welfare programs are. So the rest of the world, I think Chris just said, the hell with this, and they're doing it themselves. And I am thrilled beyond reproach to be in Panama City right now, because the infrastructure bills that they've passed are going to make Panama a G20 country within 10 years. And the country, compared to Canada, it's minuscule. It's an ink dot on a piece of paper compared to the land mass of Canada, but it doesn't matter. The money is just pouring in every day. And from this lovely office space I've got, I'm 800 meters away from the Panama Canal right over here. And every 15 minutes, I'm seeing money, money, money. These ships are going through. It costs
going to be even more. Wait till Trump starts doing the investments that he wants to do with Panama. The trade that's going to go through Panama is going to increase by billions and billions of dollars in the next 5-10 years. And it's just going to bring more money. Mexico's GDP by 2035 is going to be 7th or 8th of the entire world. So like
Beautiful.
these countries are the future. Latin America is the future. Why do you think so many rich and wealthy people, even people like George Bush, they all have properties and stuff in South America? They have all the money in the world. They can go anywhere they want. So why are they going to South America? Because they know that when shit hits the fan in the United States, Latin America is going to be the next booming economies, the next highest standards of living, the best places for in general. Even the women, oh my gosh, just go to Colombia and go to a gym. Every girl in there looks like she could be on the cover of a fitness magazine. Then you go to Canada, and it's like, I don't want to say mean things to the women there, but they're not on the same level, not even close. They don't take care of themselves. They don't eat the same. They don't have competition with other women. When I was in Colombia, you could go to in a food court in a shopping mall, and the girl that was selling me my chocolate strawberries, I wanted to propose to her on the spot. This is how beautiful the women are over there. I'm not exaggerating. I've been to over 50 countries around the world, and the two countries that have the most beautiful women, and it's not even close, was Ukraine and Colombia. Totally different styles of women, but the two most beautiful women of every country I've been to. And Czech Republic gets an honorable mention. But yeah.
But there's a lot of Colombian women here in Panama. And they've come to Panama for economic opportunity.
Yeah.
Panama is pretty much, with the exception of parts of Mexico, Panama is the United States now of the Western Hemisphere. So everybody wants to flock to Panama. I think what's going to happen here is you're going to see Trump will start setting up border patrols at what's called the Darien Gap. That's an 80-kilometer buffer where there's no highway, where Panama and Colombia join up. There's a lot of illegals coming in through there. I think at this point, the Americans are going to dump a ton of dough into Panama. And now also, Chris, that companies are fed up with the Chinese way of doing things. They're all moving to Mexico. So Mexico is now the hot spot for companies to get not
economic powerhouse for manufacturing in Mexico. People don't realize it. Mexico, because of the cheap labor, because of the large landmass, they are taking over manufacturing for many different countries. Their exports are increasing exponentially. That's why their economy is going to be a top a seventh or eighth in the world. And they only have 200 million people. So you do the math. That's pretty crazy. So it's like you said, Latin America, South America is going to be the next big boom. And all the wealthy, all the smart are moving out of North America. There's a couple spots in North America like Florida and Texas that got a concentration of wealth and intelligence during the pandemic. But now that people see the writing on the wall with the U.S., they see the U.S. capitulating to Israel, they see the U.S. rattling sabers with Russia, they see Trump poking the international bears. His idea to get rid of the income tax is great, but how is he going to really do it? The income tax makes $2 trillion. It's just 50% of the government's overall revenue. If he tries to replace that revenue with tariffs, he's going to hurt the economy and hurt the Americans just as bad as the income tax would. And in order to actually even think about getting rid of the income tax, he would have to cut 30 to 50% of the entire government. And I know he's got the Department of Government Efficiency, and they say that they're going to do just that, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Let's see what happens there. All right. So, Chris, we got some questions coming in. We got a couple of young guys watching the show. Obviously, when I announced that the astounding Chris Sky was joining me tonight, a lot of young guys under 20 decided to join the show tonight. So they're asking, what should they do to better themselves under the age of 20 in Canada? Now, I've got some ideas, but let's hear yours first. Go ahead.
The number one thing is to get a job that either pays, if you're lucky enough to have a job that pays you really well, just try to not pay rent and save your money. Because the number one expense that young people have is rent. They move out. I moved out. I didn't pay rent. I lived with chicks. I lived at different girls' houses. I didn't pay rent at all until I purchased my first home. And I was living out of my mom's house for almost 3.5 years rent-free. That's the number one thing I can tell people, because the first thing they do is they want to get a job just so they can pay rent. And then they get a job that barely pays their rent. And now they're out and they're paying their rent, and they just put themselves in a trap where they barely have enough money every month to make ends meet. And they get stuck like that for the next 10, 20 years. So no, if you don't have a job that If you don't have a job where your rent is less than 50% of your actual monthly income, and it should be really like 30% of your monthly income, then you shouldn't be paying rent. You should be living with a family member or living with a roommate, one way or the other. The average person is paying 70% of their monthly income on rent. Ridiculous. How are you going to get ahead when you're literally cutting off 3/4 of your wealth every single month? Number two, if you can, get an online or remote job so you are not stuck in Canada. If you have that job and you're living at mom's house, it won't take you long to make enough money to go to Mexico or go to Panama and get and keep doing that job while you're there until you find something better. If you don't, and you might not even have to find something better, because if you're making the money that you get paid in Canadian salary, and you bring that money to a place like Mexico or Panama, it's going to go a lot further. The other thing, stop buying shit you don't need. You know how many young kids I see, and every single time I see a young kid, what do they have? The brand new iPhone 16 Pro or whatever the fuck it is. Sorry, but that drives me crazy. You can't even pay your rent, but you have a $2,000 phone. You can't even pay your rent, but every time I see you, got a new $300 pair of sneakers on because you got to impress the girls walking around. Stop that. What does Zuckerberg and all these rich, wealthy people wear? They wear whatever the hell they want, and it costs them nothing. Meanwhile, they got $200 million yachts. People don't care about your shoes. People don't care about your phone. Having the newest phone is not a flex, ladies and gentlemen. It just goes to show that you're an idiot who can be manipulated by consumerism. And if you're one of those people that sits outside an Apple store and waits for hours, I literally see people camping at a store so they can spend money they don't even have, so they can impress people that don't give a shit about them. I'm sorry, it's ridiculous. So get that mindset out of consumerism, get yourself out of the rent debt trap, and find yourself a job that makes you enough money to go with your expenses. And if you don't have that job, then you're not ready to move out. You're not ready to be on your own. There's no shame in living at home till 25, 26 if you're stacking money. If you're a bum and you're just sitting there doing nothing, living on your mom's couch, and you got not 2 nickels to rub together, no job, no plans for the future, okay, you're an idiot. But if you're working a job and you're living at your mom's house and you're stacking that cash, and now you got tens of thousands of dollars, you have options, a lot of options. That's what young people need to do. They need to put themselves in a situation where you minimize your expenses, maximize your monthly income, so you can actually save up some money. Without money, it makes it hard to do stuff. Yet, I know an 18-year-old kid that left Canada on a bus with a backpack and $150, and he's living in Mexico for the last 3-4 years, and his life just keeps getting better and better and better. He keeps getting bigger places, better jobs, more money. So even if you leave Canada with nothing, you're more likely to have better than what you had when you're here. But if you're lucky enough to have a good family, be able to live at home for free, you're already way ahead of the game, man. Stay there, free rent, get a job, save your money, and then be in a position where you can actually make something of yourself. And for all the guys that want to date, when you're young, you shouldn't even be trying to go on dates these days. If you like, they all want to take girls out. They all want to go on all these dates, and they only care about having sex with these girls. Not like they actually want to date these girls, make them their wife, and have children with them. No, the dating culture now is hook up with as many chicks as possible in as short amount of time as possible and spend as little money on them as possible. So you have guys that can't pay their rent, wearing $300 shoes they can't afford, $2,000 phones they can't afford, bringing a girl out to a restaurant so they can try to get laid at night. And then they want her to split the bill on top of it because they really can't afford it. If that's your position, you're living wrong. Sacrifice for life. Yeah, sacrifice your lifestyle for a year. Save up your money. You'd be surprised what you can do if you have 20, 30 grand in the bank versus $20, $30.
I agree with that fully. And I got to point out to those who are watching the show, everything Chris said is absolutely correct. You don't want to be wasting your time and money on stuff that you don't need. Here's an example. The laptop that I'm currently doing this show on, I bought it in 2018. It's a gaming computer. It cost me $1,700 back then. Functioning fine. This microphone, Chris, you remember this microphone when we were doing podcasts together in 2018? Yeah, well, the same one, $150 8 years ago. The stand that it's on, I bought it at a garage sale. I don't even use a fancy gaming mouse. This is a $10 Logitech. You don't need this stuff, everybody. The speaker, Chris, you're talking on, I bought it used for $20. It's a Bluetooth speaker. It sounds great. So and the phone that I'm doing TikTok on is also 8 years old. And the second phone I'm doing Kick on is 6 years old. I want to point out to all you guys out there, Chris is right. You can't be spending money on stupid stuff that you do not need. If you buy one good quality item that you actually need and you take care of it, it'll be there for you for a very long time. Now, Chris, I do want to add one more thing here is vocabulary. You young guys out there, you need to have a huge vocabulary. You see, it used to be, everybody, that you could have an education and just be rich because nobody else had an education. But there is so much information out there, Chris, that anybody could actually learn how to do a C-section just by watching YouTube. So there's a lot of knowledge out there, but there's not a lot of vocabulary and articulation to go along with it. So when you guys out there are wanting to get buff and look good like Chris, or get a $5 haircut like me and look great, you have to fill your head with knowledge. You should be working out for health, and keep your testosterone high. You should be filling your head with knowledge. Take Chris's advice and stay home if you can, or find a way to not pay rent, and forget about checks, man. Look at Chris. Look at this guy. Look how good looking this dude is. Like Chris and I were talking earlier in the show. You've put on 20 pounds of muscle in the last 6 months. Chicks flock to you, man. So guys, make yourselves something that gets the attention of everybody. When Chris is in the room, men and women pay attention, not just because he's good looking, but because he carries himself well. And you can tell his vocabulary is huge. So let's not be spending money on stupid stuff, and let's fill your head with knowledge. And Chris will,
I gotta call people, because even so many people have these little tiny habits that they think don't make a difference. But if they're smokers, for instance, and they go to Starbucks every day, you're talking about someone that's spending now probably $10, $20 a day. That's thousands of dollars a year. Multiply that by 10 years, you just spent a down payment on a house on coffee and cigarettes.
Yeah,
and these people are on fixed income. Everything you buy counts. I started working when I was 13 years old, getting paid $12 an hour to work on a construction site. I obviously lived at home at that time. I didn't have any expenses. My family paid for my food, my shelter, my cell phone. I didn't have a car. Obviously, I didn't have gas, didn't have insurance. So every dollar I made, I could save. What's stopping the young people from doing that? Why are they waiting until they're 20 years old to start working? Imagine you started at 13 years old, even making a couple of grand a month. That means you made 25, 30 grand a year, and that's not that much money. However, if you started at 13, by the time you're 23, now you got $300,000 in the bank, and you can still be living at home. And now you have enough money to go buy yourself a house. It's called smarts, people. Like I didn't become successful because I became successful because I started early and I was persistent. Like I had my first business when I was 10 years old in grade 5. I made devil sticks. Most people watching are too young to know what those were. But I used to make them and sell them at the school, and I made over $1,200 when I was 10 years old selling items at my school. That was my first business. So I was always interested in making money because I understood the importance of it. And I understood that I didn't want to be a loser. I wanted to be able to be someone where if I want to go somewhere, I'll go somewhere. If I want to travel, I'll do it. If I want to eat this, I'll eat that. If I don't want to go to work, I won't have to go to work eventually because I'm going to work hard at the beginning of my life. So the last half of my life is fun and successful. And that's where I am now. I'm going to be, by the end of this year, when I wrap up the family business, when I sell one of my properties in Canada, when I get my severance package from working 27 years at the same company, I'll be ready to retire. I will never have to work another day in my life. I will still work just because I feel like it, doing things I like to do, working from my phone, working from my balcony, working from the beach, but I'll never have a 9 to 5. I'll never be on anybody else's time. I will have 100% freedom, and I will have 100% financial stability for me, my family, for the rest of my life. Why? Because for the last 41 years, I worked my ass off, and I stood up for myself, and I made smart decisions. So that's all you got to do, guys. If you're watching this and you're 20 and you still haven't started working, you're like 7 years behind. What are you doing at 13, 14, 15, 16? You're playing video games. That's what you're doing. So why don't you go do something and make some money? Nothing's stopping you.
Yeah. No, you're right. Nothing's stopping you. Nothing's stopping you from going jogging or doing calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, crunches. I mean, look what Chris does. Look at the size of his traps, everyone. Yeah, men especially. You know, as men, Chris, typically nobody cares about us at all. You know, that's what it boils down to, is that women don't care about us. Society doesn't care about us. We will be admired by other men out there if we achieve some of the stuff that you and I have achieved. And you and I are small potatoes compared to some of the dudes out there. What I wanted to let every young man out there know is that don't count on anybody caring about your existence or caring about your feelings. Right. As men, we don't have that luxury.
As men, you got to remember one thing. Men that are listening, remember this. Only women, dogs, and children are loved unconditionally. Men are always loved under the condition that they can provide something. Remember that. Because you are supposed to be a provider. You are supposed to be a protector. I don't care what the left tells you. For millions of years, you are supposed to be big, strong, aggressive, and you're supposed to stand up for what you believe in. You're supposed to provide for your family, and you're supposed to protect your family with your very life. How many men would actually do that today? Answer, not many. And those are the ones that are not successful. Those are the ones that are not happy. And those are the ones that get screwed over by virtually everyone in their life, especially the government. So it's really that simple. Do you want to be weak or do you want to be strong? Do you want to be poor or do you want to be rich? These are choices that you make every single day. Every choice you make today is going to affect whether you're stronger or weaker, whether you're richer or poorer. Every choice. What you choose to eat for breakfast, what you chose to do after breakfast, every single decision you make. So why would you make decisions that are going to make you weaker and poorer? Even if it makes you just a tiny bit stronger and a tiny bit wealthier, if you keep making those decisions instead of the bad decisions, watch how fast they accumulate and watch how fast you evolve into a better version of yourself that is more respected, more admired, makes more money, can get better women, can get more respect in general. Why would you want anything less than the best for yourself?
It's a very good point that you make. And I like that question. Why would you want anything other than the best for yourself? I think we got a real problem in our society, Chris, and it's affecting the economy very large. And I do want all of you to pay attention to this. Is that our society is no longer monogamous. And it is true that every single time societies went down the pathway of free love for everybody, those societies would crumble very quickly. Whenever the family unit was completely destroyed, the economies would go with it. So there is nothing wrong, especially the guys out there, with doing what Chris suggested. Work hard, fill your head with knowledge. Get your body fit, go out, find a way to make money, have that drive. If you need to work 15 hours a day, do it. Because I know, Chris, that the average guy out there would love to have a caring, loving wife and a family. It's what I wanted when I turned 16. I thought, I want my own family. I want my own way of doing things. And eventually I got there and it was magical. So you guys, you should chase that dream and do what Chris said, stay away from cigarettes and Starbucks $10 lattes and the distractions that A, cost you money, and B, stop you from making money. Who cares about the Leafs? Who cares about the Vancouver Canucks? Who cares who's going first in the draft in the NHL? How's that going to make you money? Hands up. Has anybody watching the show ever had a professional athlete give you cash? Has it ever happened? Aside from Chris Guy, it just doesn't happen. So don't waste your money giving that stuff to the pros. They don't need it. You do. Chris, exactly. Take it away.
They're fine without you. Some of those guys are paying $55,000 a month in child support. I don't think they need any money from you. So, ladies and gentlemen, the point of all of this is, if you still haven't realized that Canada is not the same country it was and it's never going to be the same again, if you still haven't realized that even the USA itself is past its prime, and if you haven't realized that they're going to do another pandemic one of these days and try to trap you in your country, try to close your business, and try to make you take another round of masks and vaccines, well, you're not paying attention, and you should be paying attention, because this is your life we're talking about. So for all the people watching, if you're a young guy, start working right away. Don't leave your parents' house for as long as you can. Stack money. If you're a young couple and you're both working online, why the hell are you still in Canada? Start exploring other places. You don't have to pay rent either. Why don't you get rid of your rent, move into your family's house for a few months? So now the money that's coming in, instead of going to your rent, can be going for plane tickets and a hotel to check out Panama or check out Mexico or check out another country. Like, think about it, ladies and gentlemen. You have to manage your resources better. You have to manage your time better. You have to get rid of all the distractions. Another thing that most people love to do is watch TV late at night. They always put your favorite shows at 9 and 10 o'clock. Why? Because they know the average person needs their 8 hours. So then what happens? You wake up super late for work, whether you have to go to school or work. You get stuck in traffic for hours, and you're on the same what they call rat race as everybody else. Change your schedule. Why would you want to drive to work where you're going to be stuck in traffic for 2 hours? You can go to work 2 hours early. Go to the gym before work when you get close to work. Not have to spend time in traffic. The average person, ladies and gentlemen, in Canada spends over 2 to 3 hours in their car every day. Think about that. 3 hours a day out of 24 hours. That's more than 15% of your life in your car. You spend another 8 hours a day sleeping. So from being in your car and sleeping, 11 hours of your day, that's almost 50% of your entire life spent sleeping or in your car. And you're trying to tell me that you don't have time to increase your productivity? You can find an extra hour a day to make money. And if you did that every single day, you'd end up with thousands of extra dollars a year, and you'd end up with tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars extra after 5 or 10 years. And all you did was rearrange your day to give yourself an extra hour to make money rather than spending 11 of your 24 hours sleeping or driving around in your car. Do you understand? Do people realize how significant that is? Think about it. How do I get so productivity? Because I only sleep 3-4 hours a night, almost every night. I'm a little bit different than most people. I have a scientific, they call it a disorder, but it's not really a disorder. They call me a short sleeper. So if you actually Google it, less than 1% of the population are like me. We don't need 7-8 hours. We're good on 4. So that alone gives me extra time in the day, and I took advantage of it. I make sure I use those extra hours. And everybody can do the same thing. You can rearrange your day so you have extra time. You don't need to watch that TV show at night. You can watch it some other time. You can record it and watch it whenever you want. You don't need to sleep 8 hours. Why don't you sleep 7 instead of 8? Is it really that much better for you to get that extra hour? Probably not. You can probably make better use of your time. We waste so much time. We waste so much money. People have no idea unless they actually write it down and see how much they're spending. And I suggest that people that are having trouble making ends meet do that just for a week. Write down every single thing you bought that week. Did you buy a donut? Did you buy toothpaste? Did you buy a deodorant? Whatever you bought, write it down and see how much you actually spent that week without realizing that you spent anything. And you'll understand.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I was paying attention to prices all over the place. So when I left Canada, I went to Playa del Carmen in Mexico for a short while. Now there's that, I forget the name of the street. Chris, you can tell me what it is. It's right beside the beach where everything is really expensive. It's this really cool party.
Fifth Avenue.
That's it.
Fifth Avenue.
So I had a margarita, which cost me $22. You know, but 3 streets over, I had 2 chicken breasts, beans, rice, and nice sauce, to the point where I was stuffed for $3.50. So if you stay out of the tourist areas in Mexico, you'll actually do quite well with your grocery bill. Here in Panama, I started writing down the grocery bill that I had, and I was being sparing when I first got here. I was spending $25 a week. Now it's about $35 a week that I'm spending because I'm getting more fruits and vegetables. As per your advice, by the way, I'm grabbing a bit more of that. But $35 a week. That's it. $35 a week.
I did the same experiment in Mexico, and I'm on almost 5,000 calories a day and over 250 grams of protein a day. And I didn't go out for 1 full week. I just bought all my groceries and cooked every one of my meals, and it cost me $200 US for the week. In Canada, it would have cost me almost $1,200 to eat the same thing.
Yeah, Canada's food prices are positively ridiculous. I took a photograph of a plastic bag I had. It was huge. It had 2 full chickens in it. It's on my Instagram channel for $4.50. That's it, for 2 full chickens. Throw them in the roaster, rip them apart, throw them in Ziploc bags. Now I've got like 12, 13 meals. But a friend of mine saw that and sent me a photograph of 1 roasted chicken from Walmart, and it was $28 for 1 chicken. $28.
I go to the butcher shop here, and I get kilos of chicken breast, already boneless, already skinless, already sliced nice and thin. So you literally just got to throw it in the pan, and I get an 8 to 10 ounce chicken breast for about $1 US.
God, man, that's the way it should be. You know, I'm buying pork chops here in Panama City for 70 cents a pork chop. There's so much more to life out there when you don't have to panic about where your money's going to come from or going to food. When you're not wasting the kind of money that Canadians and Americans are in some states on food, your mind is actually very free and clear to be far more productive. I'm not one bit worried about any of my bills down here in Panama. Again, like I said earlier in the show, the subway system here is better than Toronto's subway. It's better than New York's, and it's 35 cents to get on the train. Buses inside the city are 25 cents. And there's also private companies who have these really cool 70s style pimp buses with the velvet curtains inside, but air conditioning and whatnot. And they're 45 cents a ride. So, you know, look, everybody, it's different. Panama, Mexico, Nicaragua, El Salvador, these are different places with different cultures and different rules. But why is different bad to Canadians? So, Chris, I want to get your take now. I mean, you and I are both Canadian citizens. What is your take on why Canadians are so terrified of everything outside of Canada? Go ahead.
Because they've never experienced it. Canadians are literally children. They're literally children in adult bodies for the most part. And they are susceptible to the propaganda that tells them never leave Canada. Canada is the best. Everywhere else is dangerous. Everywhere else people are suffering. No, people are suffering in Canada. Yes, there's suffering and poor people in every country in the world. But if you are coming from a place like Canada and you have any type of education or any type of resources or any type of drive, you can do far better in these countries and have a better life and be in a better mood and have less stress and be healthier and eat better food and live longer. Like, what more do you need to know? All you need to do is go and experience it. And the biggest problem that Canadians have is that they've spent way too much money on their rent or their mortgage. So if you're one of those people that you're crippling yourself because of that, I would go and live either with a roommate, I would live with a relative, I would live with a girlfriend. I would not be paying rent. I would have a place to live that's not costing me 50 to 70% of my monthly income. Because that way you're never going to get anywhere. You're going to be in the rat race for the rest of your life. You're going to start it when you're 17 or 18. And by the time you're 50, you're going to be in the exact same position you were at 17, except you're going to be bitter and angry and realize that you have no future.
Yeah, it's sad. And talking about cost savings, I mean, this is just anecdotal, but when I moved out of my parents' place at age 18, I lived in a pickup truck for a year and a half. Yeah,
there you
so
go.
I knew where all the parking garages were, where I could sleep in the truck and be left alone and be a little bit warmer at night. And a buddy of mine even cut a little door so I could lie sideways and pee out of the truck without getting out. But the amount of money I saved was unreal because I was DJing for between $400 and $1,000 a night back in the 80s and the early 90s. I saved a boatload of money, and I learned some incredibly valuable lessons. Chris, we're getting some questions here in the Kick and in the TikTok rooms. They're asking both you and I, how safe is the Yucatan Peninsula and how safe is Panama City for women? I'll let you take the Mexico question. Go ahead. Single women.
The Yucatan Peninsula, especially Merida, is considered the safest place in all of North America. And I've been there. It's very, very safe. They have the longest boardwalk in the world. They have a boardwalk that goes 7 miles out into the ocean. And it's absolutely beautiful. There's all kinds of stores and other things around there, so you can walk it. You can walk it. It's probably the nicest part of Merida, but it is super safe, ridiculously safe. Obviously, there's bad parts in Mexico. If you go to the areas where the cartels are fighting other cartels, or you go to border towns like Tijuana, or you go to places like Acapulco, yeah, there's garbage places. Just like let's go to South Central Los Angeles, or let's go to Chicago. Like, there's places in the States that are far worse than even the worst places in Mexico. But then there's places in Mexico that are an absolute paradise. Go to Puerto Aventuras, nestled between Playa del Carmen and Tulum. It's a completely gated private city, 1,000-acre city on the water behind security walls and surrounded by security walls. You can't even get in there unless, if I'm living there, I got to send you a QR code invite. You show it to the armed security and they let you in. And the whole place it's like a paradise in Mexico. It's expensive as hell. If you're looking at a 2-bedroom condo, it's $600,000-700,000 grand US, but you're literally in one of the wealthiest, safest parts of all of Mexico. And everybody in there is somebody. So if you can get into that area, you've got it made. That's probably one of the nicest parts of all of North America. So the things that you hear about Mexico do not apply to all of Mexico. They apply to very isolated areas that even the Mexican people know to avoid. So if you go there, that's on you. But if you go to places like Playa del Carmen, you go to places like Tulum, you go to places like Puerto Aventuras or Merida in the Yucatan, you're not going to have any problems whatsoever. You're going to wonder what all the fuss was about, and you're going to realize that life there is a lot more relaxed, a lot more free, and you just wake up happier. I wake up happy every day. In Canada, I wake up miserable every day.
Yeah, it's a true story. And to answer your question there about how safe it is here in Panama, I'll start with Panama City because I live in Panama City. In fact, I live quite close to one of the slums because they are gentrifying everything. So I kind of bought at the right time. But even in the worst part of the city, I walk alone at night through the city. Sometimes I've even got my headphones in. I'm not looking around like this. But what's funny is the locals believe it to be dangerous. So they'll say, no, gringo, gringo. No. Go back. They'll actually guide me out of the neighborhood because they have more fear about it than I do. And the police patrols, Chris, are actually pretty amazing here in Panama City. They have what's called the tourist police. So they're making sure that El Gringos are safe within the city. And Panamanians, especially the criminal types, they know that if you're robbing gringos, you go bye-bye for 10 years because gringos are money. And foreigners are money. So don't mess with the country's money. There are 2 neighborhoods in Panama City I'll go to no problem during the day, but not at night, because the gangs they're having pissing contests with each other at night. I don't want to be in the crossfire of something stupid like that. So, and again, like you said, if you go to those neighborhoods, that's on you. But the Canadian government has been lying, saying that various cities in Panama and Mexico and El Salvador and Colombia are so over the top dangerous that they've got travel advisories out. And I'm telling you, there is nothing wrong with Panama, period. It's a great place. Come on down. I'll buy you dinner if you're cute. All right, Chris, go ahead.
I was going to just mention in Playa del Carmen, they have those police patrols, and these guys are on pickup trucks with huge flashing lights, and they got 4 or 5 guys with assault rifles standing in the back of the pickup. And if me and you are standing on a street corner having a conversation, you'll see one of these guys drive by every 2 to 3 minutes. So nobody will even look at you wrong in Playa del Carmen, because they know it relies on tourism. They know it relies on foreigners. And I've never seen any type of crime there. The worst thing I've seen is cops bothering people because they think they have drugs on them. And that's it. That's it. I haven't seen any violence anywhere in Mexico. And I've been living there on and off for the last couple of years. So maybe it's because I don't go to crappy places.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to go to places where I have been absolutely warned beyond reproach by everybody here. I'm not going to go. But there are areas of Toronto that I also stopped going to alone.
Yeah, let's go to Jane and Finch. Let's go to Dufferin and Clark. Let's see how well that turns out.
Yeah, a few other places. Regent Park in Toronto. Yeah. No, thank you. There's a lot of places I just wouldn't go. And then there was a couple spots in Calgary where there was a chance you might get stuck by a needle from a drug user because they're having a mental breakdown. It's not that Calgary's culture was wrapped around violence. It's just a matter of there are so many mentally ill homeless folks there that it's dangerous to be in select areas. They don't have those issues here. They actually do have assistance programs in Panama for the mentally ill and for those who can't function within society. And that is because Panama and most of Mexico as well, they are Judeo-Christian countries with strong family values. Now, in Panama, everyone asks me, what does a Panamanian look like? Well, you can't tell because every race here is completely mixed. Yeah. I think I've got the brightest skin in the entire country. But the point I want to make here is, regardless of what the skin color is and what the genetic background is, Panama has united itself under one flag and one common culture. They even have a full 5-hour parade to celebrate Flag Day in November. They love their flag. They love their country. They love their family life. So the country does incredibly well based on those values, which Canada and the United States used to have and no longer do. Chris, I want to get your take on Mexico.
There's unchecked illegal immigration weaponized to destroy our culture and destroy our country. Guess what? That's not happening in Panama. That's not happening in Mexico. They don't let illegal immigrants in millions at a time. If you are going to be an immigrant to Mexico, they want to make sure that you're going to assimilate to Mexican culture, not bring your culture with them. We don't have Diwali and fireworks and friggin' in Mexico like they do in Brampton, Ontario, and all these other places. Like, we don't even, there's not even a definition of what a Canadian is anymore, what Canadian culture is. Now it's more Indian than anything else. And if that doesn't make you understand that Canada is never going to be the same again, and it's only going to get worse, well, sit around and watch the show, because you're obviously not paying attention enough.
Yeah, you're there. Nobody's paying attention, unfortunately. And then, of course, Canada has hate speech laws. Section 319, subsections 1, 2, and 3 of the Criminal Code essentially state that if you offend someone who's not white, you go to jail for 2 years. Stand-up comedians were getting arrested all over Canada for cracking supposedly racist jokes. And then God help you in Canada if you're on stage and you crack an LGBTQ joke.
Oh, gosh. You're game over for you.
So, Chris, I want to say this. When you got a country that's arresting its citizens for cracking jokes or having opinions, what happens? The money leaves the country.
As fast as physically possible. Look at, you know how many billions have left the Canadian economy permanently? You know how many multi-million-dollar companies that employed thousands and thousands of Canadians for decades have closed their doors and said, screw you, we're taking our money and assets and we're leaving this place? Where do you think Trudeau's going to live when he has to resign? You think he's going to live in Canada? No, he's going to go to Latin America too. He's not even going to live in the Canada that he created, because he created it on purpose to be garbage. So imagine your own leader with all his money, rather than retire in Canada, he's going to leave the country as soon as he friggin' can. That tells you everything you need to know. His mission was to destroy our country, and he did a very good job.
Yeah, that was his job. He bought a house in Costa Rica, by the way, for those who care. I found that out when I was living in Costa Rica. So, yeah, the Costa Rican government put a block on him bringing in all of his money, but I'm sure he got enough in there to live a very comfortable life. So,
Cayman Islands, Switzerland, all these different offshore accounts, Barbados. There's so many offshore accounts that he'll be spending all that money. And his net worth went from what, a few million to a few hundred million during COVID, from all the insider trading and all the other money laundering scams that he pulled and all the payouts he got. Meanwhile, Canadians cheer. Oh, he's resigning. The guy committed every crime against humanity possible. The guy stole hundreds of millions of dollars. The guy's literally responsible for thousands and thousands of Canadians dying or being maimed. And his big punishment was being forced to resign his position a few months before he was going to lose the election anyway. And people pretend like this is a win. No, this is him bowing out, pulling his golden parachute, and saying, see ya.
Yeah, and nobody's going to punish him.
Nobody.
Yeah. Just like his father, who ruined the country as well, no one's going to punish him. He'll get away with it. My goodness. Chris, we're down to our last 20 minutes here. So I just wanted to reflect now a little bit on yourself. You were in the construction business and the development business for quite some time. You made a very interesting point when I was asking you about development of land. And I want to bring this up because I do need our American and foreign friends to understand why they should not be investing in Canada. Let's talk about, I buy 1,000 acres of land and I want to build 2,000 houses on it. You told me that there was some massive tax bill I'd have to pay that I was floored by. Let's talk about how that would function. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, what people have to understand is if somebody like me is selling you a house for $1 million, over $300,000 of that $1 million is all taxes, fees, and levies that go straight to the government. So on that house, our profit margin as a builder developer is less than 10%. So we have a single-digit profit margin on that $1 million. So you're making less than 100 grand as a builder developer. Meanwhile, the government is making $300,000 on that house, if not more. And how are they doing it? Well, like Kevin said, say you buy a piece of farmland and you want to put, it's big enough that you can put 1,000 homes on it. Well, first of all, you got to get the zoning changed, which costs all kinds of time and money, to be able to build out those types of houses on it and create those lots. Then you got to put in the roads, the sewers, the street lights, and everything else to develop the land and get fully serviced lots. Now, once you have those fully serviced lots, depending if they're townhouses, semis, or singles, you got to pay what they call development charges. So now you got to pay a fee for every single lot you've created. And how much is the fee? Well, it varies greatly from municipality to municipality and product type, but it could be almost $100,000 per lot. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. So imagine you have to pay $100,000 a lot, almost. I'm rounding up a little bit because in most cases it's around 70 and change. But imagine you have to pay $100,000 for each lot, and you just created 1,000 lots. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Then now you have fully serviced lots. Now you want to build a home on it? Well, now you need to buy a building permit, and that's thousands of dollars more for each lot. And then when you go to build the house, they charge you GST and they charge the purchaser HST. So now they're taxing all that money. And then whatever profit you make, if you are lucky enough to make profit, they're going to take another 30%. So the government is making exponentially more than the builders, but you have uneducated Canadians and Americans thinking the builder developer is making all this money and taking all this money and driving up the cost. We make a fraction compared to the government, and then we get taxed through the ass on the amount of money we made. And we have to take all the risk. We have to put up a large percentage of investment in order to buy the land, put up even more investment through bank loans to develop the land, and then build the houses. And now you're in a position where you have a project that takes you maybe 5-7 years from start to finish, and you have interest carrying the whole time. So it's not an easy gig. And if you can't predict the markets properly, and you can't predict costs properly, and you can't predict what you can sell these houses properly or how long it's going to take you, you can lose your entire company in one development. And it happens all the time, especially if the market changes.
Well, on top of everything, all the taxes and levies you just mentioned there, you've got to give up a percentage of the area that you're developing a neighborhood into for parks and parkettes and so on.
And that could vary depending largely, like if you need a holding pond, for instance, they might tell you that if you have 100, 200 lots, they might say, sorry, because there's not enough sewer system here or not enough drainage system here, we're going to take 30 of those lots and turn it into a holding pond. So now you just lost over 10% of your overall product. And that totally changes your entire final product and your entire pro forma. And that might be something you didn't know when you first started developing until they started doing soil tests or road tests, etc. Then there's even the other thing. Imagine you bought that 1,000 acres and you're building those 1,000 lots and developing it, and then they dig and they find something that looks like a native artifact or a piece of pottery from the 17 or 1800s. Surprise! Now they put an environmental freeze on your development and they turn it into an archaeological dig site. And your project is frozen and disqualified from being able to continue until they finish their archaeological assessment. And in some cases, if they deem it an archaeological site where they want to do a lot of work, they can take away your whole development from you under the guise of environmental protection. That's Canada. And I've been through all of these things. I've been in a scenario in Brampton, Ontario, where we had a 100-house subdivision, and they wanted to expand Humber West Parkway. And Humber West Parkway was immediately adjacent to our property. So they came to us and they said, we want to expand the Humber West Parkway. And they're like, okay, why are you talking to us? We don't own that land. Go talk to the landowner. They're like, because we want you to buy it and give it to us for free. We said, excuse me? They said, well, it's around $900,000. You're going to buy it and you're going to sign it over to the town for free, or we're going to hold up your development for years and you're never going to get to build, and it's going to cost you even more money in the long run. Literal extortion. Literally extortion. So what did we do? We took the government to court. It took us 2 years, cost $250,000 in legal fees, and guess what? We didn't have to pay the $900,000 to buy a piece of farmland to give it to the government so they wouldn't have to buy it themselves. And guess what else happened? Because they delayed us 2 years, we were lucky enough that the market improved, so we ended up being able to sell all the houses for around 15% more than we would have otherwise. So it worked out in our favor, but it just goes to show you that the government is never your friend. The government is always your enemy. The government will try to use every tactic to take advantage of you, take your money, and make a fool of you if you let them. And why the hell would you want to live in a country where the government treats you like that?
Well, why indeed? And when you compare to building here in Panama City, if you buy a piece of land, all countries are corrupt. You just have to know who to grease and how much. You'd be able to actually purchase a piece of land right downtown and build a skyscraper. They wouldn't do much aside from, hey, buddy, $10,000, $20,000, $10,000, sign off, and it's good. And I am okay with that kind of corruption, because if 10 grand gets the government the hell away from you to do a development, then give the 10 grand. Just build it into the cost. In fact, any intelligent developer out there in Latin America and South America understands that you have to build the bribe into the price. Nothing wrong with the bribe. I wish we could do that in Canada. You know, the saddest example I want to give you is there's that company called Supercut, not Supercuts, I'm sorry, Sport Cuts. It's a sports haircut place for men where they've got sports playing on TVs in the mirrors. I forget the actual name, but there's one gentleman I was talking to in my hometown, the city of Mississauga beside Toronto. They held him up where he had to pay rent, $4,600 a month on rent, plus electricity and gas, everything else. It was 10 grand a month he was paying just to keep the place open. They wouldn't let him open for almost 6 months because one of the inspectors said the ceiling was half an inch too short on a building that was open less than a year. And the guy says, oops, I was wrong. Sorry. Finally, this guy was able to open up his doors. And that's how Canada functions. Why would you want to do business in a country like that? The country is horrible. So I'm telling you, and I think, Chris, what you're alluding to as well, is don't invest in Canada. Stay out. I mean, please tell me what you think.
Well, like I said, I never want to keep all my eggs in one basket. For me to keep all my assets and all my money in Canadian currency, it would just be the biggest mistake anybody can make. I want to spread my assets around as many countries and as many banking systems as possible. I want to diversify my assets, mitigate my risk, and maximize my return on investment. It's really not that complex. It's like these are the principles that you should be living by. And in Canada, your money's at risk. You don't get good return on investment. It's hard for you to protect your capital. And the Canadian dollar is probably going to go to hell in the next 10 years, if not sooner. So you have to be absolutely crazy to keep 100% of your assets and income in Canadian banking system, Canadian currency, Canadian real estate. You have to diversify. Diversity is your protection. Diversity is your insurance policy. It's that simple.
Yeah. Economic diversity, not that diversity is strength.
Equity and inclusion. Yes, diversity of your assets. I should have been more clear. Sorry.
Just making sure we're clear on that.
Yeah,
I agree fully. A lot of Canadians will ask, and actually a lot of Americans too, how do we protect our money? Some property, some gold, some silver, a little bit of cash, some Bitcoin, play around with the other junk coins, as Chris was saying earlier in the show, and have your money in minimum 3 countries. Now, one more thing I'm going to recommend to everybody is you want to have as many passports as you can get your hands on from different countries. I beg all of you, if you come from countries like Italy, like Chris, you know, like my grandshire came from the British Isles and whatnot, there are ways to get those passports. Even Portugal is now allowing grandchildren of Portuguese-born citizens to go back to Portugal, get a tax break, and get the Portuguese passport, which is an EU passport.
They give you a tax break in Portugal. I know a lot of rich people that just got residency and passports in Portugal. All the money you bring into Portugal for the first 10 years is tax-free. That's the deal they're giving people. Yeah, very good deal. So these are the kind of things you missed if you're not doing research for other countries and you're just thinking about Canada. Like, there are crazy deals like this in a lot of countries around the world. Even places, I believe, I can't remember if it was Honduras or Nicaragua, they allow you to bring in all kinds of money and use it tax-free for business. So whatever you use for the business becomes tax-free income. There's some crazy deals out there because a lot of these countries want to attract the money that they know wants to leave the West. It's like you said, it's not just the economy, it's our entire culture. We are literally Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm going to hit you with some stats for relationships.
Yeah.
75% of Black children in the United States are born out of wedlock. Over 40% of women are single mothers by the time they're 25. Now a new stat shows that almost 50% of women are going to be single for their entire lives. 50%. Do that math. Where does that leave the country? It leaves the country in a state of complete degeneration. Yeah, like and what are they going to do? Replace it with third world immigrants? Just keep replacing Americans with more immigrants from third world countries, just like they're doing in Canada? That's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for disaster. And nowadays, you got people that don't want to get married. They don't want to have a stable relationship. Most men can't even afford to have a family. They have to have a dual income family where they can barely make ends meet with two people's salary, especially if you live in Canada. So economic factors are preventing people from having children if they're good people and want to have good families. So you put all these things together, and it's showing that it's going to be a rough ride in the West. And like, people make jokes about it. They say, oh, it's time to go find a girl in another country, jokingly. But that's the reality. If you want a girl that hasn't slept with 100 people by the time she's 25, isn't already have 2 kids, doesn't have some type of mental disorder, or is just not a good person, you more than likely have to leave Canada and the US and go to countries like Colombia, where there's so many pretty girls that they all know they're in competition with each other, so they actually have to be good people. You don't get that here in Canada, because you have a few girls that are good looking and the rest are average looking. So the ones that are average looking think they're good looking because they've been told by Western media that they're all perfect 10s, even if they're 300 pounds and the meanest woman you've ever met, she's still a 10. And then you have all these women that won't settle, and they're all going after the same 1% of men. So you have all these girls with the same, having kids with the same guys. None of the guys are in their lives. And then you end up with these women that have 4 children by the time they're 32 with 3 different men, and they still think they deserve a guy that makes millions of dollars and is going to look after their entire family for them. It's unrealistic, and it's ridiculous. And this is the norm now in the United States and Canada, and it's scary.
Yeah, but in Colombia, it's not the norm. In Brazil and Argentina and Panama and El Salvador, Mexico, this is not the norm. They don't do this. The whole thing about let's go sleep with everybody that we want to because the media says it's okay. It's not a good recipe for anything. And you made a good point. When you have half of the female populace who are going to be single for the rest of their lives, just based on the attitudes of society, there's no replacement value. There's going to be no new taxpayers born, period. What happens when you and I, Chris, I'm older than you, but when you and I get into our 60s and 70s and there's no generation to pay for anything, I guess you and I are going to be working till we're 105. Because there's no new
import another 20 million Indians. They can import as many Indians as they want. There's billions of them over there. You think India cares that they're losing 1 million people a year? They replace them. They get like billions of people born every year. So that's why within 5 to 10 years, Indians are going to be the majority in Canada. Canadians are going to be a small minority in their own country. And if you don't think it's going to completely change the country for the worse, congratulations, you deserve to stay here.
Yeah, Chris, we're down to our last 2 minutes here, man. Look, you have not made public appearances for quite some time, and you know what? I love you for being here tonight, man. I miss talking to you, just in general, just seeing your face. I miss. So, how do people find you online? Go ahead.
I'm not online anywhere. I'm banned on everything. People just can email me if they really need to get in touch with me. It's chrissky83@gmail.com. Everybody has my phone number. It's still online, so people call me every day. It's 416-400-9994. WhatsApp's the best because I'm always out of the country, so I would use the internet more than I use my cell phone.
Man, Chris, I got to say again, thanks for being here, man. It's so good to see you, and I can see how happy and healthy you are being in Mexico and away from communist Canada. So congratulations.
Same to you, man. You look better than you've ever looked. You look happier than you ever looked, and I can tell you're more successful than you've ever been. So hats off to you, bro. You went through a huge struggle. They tried to put you down every way possible. They tried to kick you when you're down. They tried to burn you when you were down. They tried to arrest you when you were down, just like me. So I know me and you went through very, very similar hardships. And to see us both coming out on the other side unscathed and stronger and galvanized, boom. That's what it's all about, bro.
And we're both still smiling. And no matter what anyone says, we're both still the 2 best looking guys in the country. That's just how it is. Right. Chris, man, have a great night, pal. Thanks for being here. Take care.
My pleasure, bro. Right, cheers. Everyone.
The remarkable and astounding Chris Sky. You know, it really is a pleasure to see him again. And I'm so happy that he was able to make it out for his first public appearance in a very long time. My name is Kevin J. Johnston, everybody. Kevin J. Johnston, Canada's #1 podcaster and, of course, biggest mouth. I get rid of all of your tax problems in Canada. If you have any trouble at all with the Canada Revenue Agency, I can ditch every single solitary tax problem and put your money where it belongs, and that is back in your pocket. This is the Tax and Money Show, which plays every Tuesday live at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That's it for now, everybody. I love you all, and good night.